The days following Gary's escape unfolded like the calm before a storm, their monotony interrupted by the arrival of a fearsome figure, Randolph, the whipcracker overseer. He appeared on the plantation one fateful morning, a towering mass of a man, cloaked in an aura of dread. His mere presence was a chilling declaration of the grim times that lay ahead. His first day on the plantation was marked by a ruthless demonstration of his purpose. Gathered in the courtyard, the slaves watched in silent horror as Randolph's whip cracked through the air, an ominous spectacle of power and dominance. Mr. Harrison introduced him, his voice cold and steady. "This is Randolph, our new overseer. You will heed his instructions, without question. I will not tolerate any defiance." Randolph stood there, his sinister silhouette stark against the rising sun. His cold gaze swept over the crowd of slaves, each one feeling the chilling touch of his stare. The whip hung heavily in his grip, a hideous symbol of his authority. His voice, when he spoke, was deep and grating, a cold echo that seemed to scrape across the courtyard. "Disobedience won't be tolerated. Work hard, follow orders, and you might just make it through the day without feeling the sting of my whip." The chilling threat hung heavily in the air, setting the tone for the dark days to come. Work became even more strenuous. The field slaves pushed to their limits under Randolph's unrelenting gaze. His whip was a constant reminder of their grim reality, its cruel mark left on more than one back. The plantation, now operating under the whip's shadow, morphed into an efficient machine running on fear and pain. Yet, amidst this turmoil, the whispers of resistance began to stir. Dreams of freedom, sparked by Gary's escape, simmered beneath the surface, fueling secret hopes and daring plans. John found himself staring at the horizon one evening, the orange glow of the setting sun reflecting in his eyes. "Freedom," he murmured to himself, the word tasting foreign yet sweet on his lips. In the wake of Randolph's arrival, life on the Harrison plantation was stripped of the sparse comfort it once held. Each dawn brought a harsher day than the last, with the sun's rise commencing a tortuous cycle of unending toil and unrelenting oppression. John, Norris, and Tricia, the stoic trio of the field slaves, were put to the test. Their bodies bore the brunt of the intensified labor, muscles screaming in protest and skin raw from the sun and the whip. But it was their spirit that suffered the most, the constant strain threatening to snuff out the spark of hope Gary's escape had ignited. In the cotton fields, where once there was at least camaraderie and shared laughter amidst the back, breaking work, now there was only grim determination and silent prayers. The fields stretched endlessly, a sea of white mocking their dwindling strength. One blistering afternoon, the sun high and unforgiving, John and Norris found themselves toiling side by side. Sweat dripped down their faces, staining the cotton at their feet. John grunted, breaking the long silence. "Can't keep on like this, Norris." His voice was hoarse, worn out from the sun and dust. Norris, his face drawn and tired, nodded. "Aye, John. Ain't right. Ain't no life for no man." The emotional toll was manifest in their haggard faces, their bloodshot eyes, and their beaten spirits. Tricia, the usually vivacious and resilient woman, was reduced to a silent worker, her bright eyes dimmed. Even the house slaves, under Amy's leadership, weren't spared the harsh changes. Amy, once the cheerful soul who could smuggle out a smile even in the gloomiest days, was seen more often with worry lines etching her forehead and a sorrowful tilt to her lips. "Never seen the likes of this before, not in all my years," she whispered to Mrs. Harrison one day while preparing her evening tea. Mrs. Harrison, pale and quiet, merely nodded, her gaze lost in the distance. The arrival of the overseer had shifted something fundamental in the plantation's rhythm. The whip's echo was a grim metronome against the heartbreaking symphony of strained sighs, the haunting melody of suffering. The plantation, while more efficient than ever, had lost its soul to the relentless crack of the whip and the fearful whispers of the oppressed. The sun had barely kissed the horizon, painting the sky with hues of pink and orange when the work began. The fields whispered with the soft rustle of cotton as the weary slaves trudged out, their bodies casting long, somber shadows on the dew-kissed ground. The once vibrant plantation now wore a pall of desolation. As the day unfolded, the whip cracked. The cotton was picked, and the exhausting dance of forced labor went on. Time seemed to lose its meaning as minutes stretched into hours and hours, into seemingly endless days. Faces etched with despair, they labored on, the harsh reality of their existence weighing heavily on their hearts. John, Norris, and Tricia were forced to pick up the slack left by Gary's escape. Their tasks increased, their rest reduced, and their bodies bore the marks of their extended servitude. After a long day in the fields, John and Norris found themselves by the well, their exhausted bodies craving the cool relief of water. John's hands, hardened by labor, cupped the water and brought it to his parched lips. "We ain't horses, Norris," John rasped, his voice barely audible over the sound of their labored breathing. "Can't keep pulling this load." Norris, his forehead creased in worry, simply nodded. "I know, John, I know." Tricia, usually the beacon of optimism, also succumbed to the harshness of their new reality. One evening, Amy found her sitting outside their quarters, her usually lively eyes dull and distant. "You all right, Tricia?" Amy asked, her voice laden with concern. Tricia glanced at Amy, a bitter laugh escaping her lips. "Can you believe it, Amy? We thought it couldn't get any worse." And it wasn't just the physical toll. The plantation's gloomy atmosphere seeped into their quarters, their meals, and their scant moments of rest. The air was thick with despair, the usually lively discussions replaced with heavy silences. In the face of the insurmountable hardships, the slaves labored on, each day a testimony to their resilience. Yet within them, the spark of rebellion flickered, fueled by their shared adversity. They had borne the brunt of their increased burdens in silence. But how much longer could they endure?